Now the House will come to order. Please join Representative Pelton in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Shee will please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile, Bacon, Baisley. All right. Baisley's excused. Benavides.
Here.
Burnett. She's on JTC, I think. Okay, Burnett's excused. Bird. Haven't seen her. Bird's excused. Bockenfeld. Excused. Basenecker. Excused. Bradfield. Caraveo. No. Excused. Carver is excused. Catlin.
Aye.
So what do we want to do?
Cutter. No. Cutter's excused. Doherty. Excused. Duran. Esgar.
Here.
Right.
Here.
Exum. Froelich.
Here.
Geithner is excused. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Gray. No. Excused. Hanks. Excused. Herod. Holtorf. Hooten. Judah. Kennedy. Kip. Larson. Lindsay.
Here.
Lontine. Excused. Luck. Lynch. Okay, Lynch excused. McCluskey. McCormick. McCormick's excused. McKean. Oh, sorry. Hi. McKean, hey. Excused. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae. Mullica is excused. Neville.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Pelton. Pico is excused. Ransom. Excused. Rich. She's here. Rich is here, okay. Ricks. No? Excused. Roberts. Sandridge. Sandridge excused. Sirota. Snyder. Soper. Sullivan. Tipper. Tatone.
Here.
Valdez A. Excused. Valdez D.
Here.
Van Beber. Excused. Van Winkle. Weissman. Will. Williams. Woodrow. Woog is excused. Young. Mr. Speaker.
Sandridge is here.
Yep. All right. He's in person though. Yep.
With 46 present and 19 excused, we have a quorum. Members, what we'll do is, I know traffic is tough with the weather, so what we'll do is we'll go through the morning routine and then we'll take a quick recess before thirds to make sure people have time to get in and make sure that their voice is heard. Representative Pelton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the Journal of Wednesday, February 23rd be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Representative Pelton. Members, you have heard the motion. The journal be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. I heard all the ayes up here. The motion is approved. Announcements and introductions. Representative Van Winkle.
Nervousness there, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in the gallery up here, we have some terrific people joining us in the House today from the Independent Electrical Contractors, specifically the Emerging Leaders Program, which is designed to help advance the business skills and network of mid-career individuals that are on the trajectory for senior level leadership within their companies and industry. I see Stefan up there. I see some great leaders and great hardworking taxpayers up there. So welcome to your people's house.
Thank you. Welcome to the People's House. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. further announcements and introductions. Representative Holtorf and Representative Gray. Maybe we'll wait 1 second, Representative Holtorf. Let's go to Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the Agriculture, Livestock, and Water Committee will meet upon adjournment in room 107. The order of the bills will be a little different than what's printed in your calendar. We'll hear 1092 first, then 1168, and then Senate Joint Resolution 002. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCormick. Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Education Committee, the calendar is correct today, so we have 4 sunsets, and we have 1 bill that's coming up, 1203. See you there.
Representative Gray and Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen in the chamber. I have an important announcement that everybody is well aware of. An invasion of Ukraine began over the wee hours of last night. And I'm going to ask after our comments for a moment of silence to show our support for the Ukrainian people. As we know, in being a study of military history and having attended the United States Army War.
People who live in Ukraine right now, and they've built their families, they've built their businesses, they've built their lives on a certain set of expectations. And I can't imagine what it's like to be there today, to know what tomorrow is going to bring, what next week is going to bring. You know, the explosions have started. And to know both, am I going to have physical safety for my family, but also, you know, is a autocratic regime going to come in and change everything about my life? And I don't know how you wake up with that. I don't know how you do it, but it's so many people. And so I think that if we can keep our hearts and minds with those folks, again, if there's something we could do to stop it from this chamber, we would do it. We can't, but I just think about each and every individual who is living with incredible uncertainty and fear this morning, and whatever empathy we can show for them, I think would be great.
Thank you. Representative Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm proud to stand here with you all on this moment as well. Also, as a graduate of the Army War College, I think we all know how devastating the impacts of war are. Basically, my entire family serves in the U.S. Armed Forces, and my family has seen war firsthand and the devastating impacts that it has, not just during the time of war, but it's ongoing, it's lasting. And so I just stand and ask those who are prayerful people to pray with us for their safety at this time when we know it's just a very unsafe and unstable time right now. And those who are not prayerful people, I still ask for your juju, your wuju, whatever you want to give us, and send to the people who are at the heart of this conflict. There will be more casualties. We know that, and we hope that they are as small as possible, and that we can bring this tragedy really to a swift and immediate end. So with that, I stand with you in the moment of silence.
Thank you, Representative Herring. I think right before we do that, Representative Michelson-Janae.
Boots on the ground. Every single one of us is going to be impacted by boots on the ground. This is not a war that our kids, their kids, have been really training for. This is not the desert. This is entirely different, and they are scared. Please think about our boots on the ground.
Minority Leader McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I went to Colorado State University, and I worked for the Department of Ag and Resource Economics. And while I was there, I worked for the International Center for Ag and Resource Development. And we had professors from Ukraine come every year to learn how to teach market economics and to learn how to convert Central Economics to a new system. Some of my dearest friends from that experience are right now in Kiev, across the breadbasket of Russia. And it's partly what I would like us all to think about is that Ukraine is a lot like the Eastern Plains. It's where the wheat comes from, and it's where the warm water port is, and all these things that make it this beautiful place. So on the way down here, I was calling one of my friends at CSU and said, have you heard from any of our colleagues and our friends? And they haven't, but they've been making the calls and they've been sending the emails. What I don't think we ever really realize here is when a war begins, what dramatic change comes to the lives of those people, because they can no longer get their phone calls and their emails are not going through. To be alone in a conflict is maybe the worst terror that one country can exercise on another, to cut them off from the world and to have them fight for their lives. And so I walked in today and I was trying to remember, because I don't know much Russian, but I do remember learning a little bit of Ukrainian. And I was trying to remember how you say certain things, spasiba, pashausta, all of the sort of the common words. What I was trying to remember is how do you say God be with you? And to say that in Ukrainian is Boże mi. Boże mi. God be with you.
Representative Ortiz.
I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this forward, and to say that I feel a certain kind of way about everything that's going on today is an understatement. Those of us that served, we weren't necessarily training for this kind of fight, but we know what the Russians are capable of. And I can't help but think of that Ukrainian soldier against one of the most well-trained, advanced militaries that the world has right now, fighting for their lives and fighting for their freedoms and their democracy. I hope that part of standing in solidarity is recognizing how important it is that we stop being divided ourselves, because our enemies, like Russia and China, are counting on that. They're hoping that we're weakened and that the Ukrainians and our NATO allies will be on their own. So I hope we realize the importance of standing united together and putting these petty differences aside and stop letting foreign nations impact the love that we have for each other as countrymen and women, because they're taking advantage of it abroad right now. We're seeing it, and they will try and bring it to us.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been watching this very closely. I'm a graduate of the Naval War College, and then I went over and served on a NATO staff. This is actually the war that I was trained for and the war that I stood against, guard against. So I know what's going on in there very, very well. It is probably the most dangerous situation that we've seen since the end of World War II. And we do need to stand in solidarity. What's going on in there has a danger of spilling out far beyond. And we need to give our prayers and we need to give our support to the people of Ukraine for what they're facing now is one of the most dangerous and deadly situations in recent memory. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask this time for a moment of silence as we pray to God in our way, or whatever our beliefs are. Thank you.
Moment of silence is granted. Thank you, colleagues. Further announcements and introductions. Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of House, State, Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs, we will be meeting upon adjournment in LSBA to hear House Bills 1156 and 1257.
Representative Byrd. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And today in House Finance Committee, we will be meeting upon adjournment, hearing House Bills 1103, 1093, and this is an important announcement. House Bill 1138 will be laid over and heard on Monday.
Representative Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Business Affairs and Labor Committee, we will meet today at 1:30 in our normal room 112. We have one bill on the agenda, Senate Bill 34.
Representative Herod. Representative Herod.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just want to say that last night the Northeast Denver community lost someone really special to us. I might get emotional. Last night I learned of the passing of Cleo, who was really a stalwart in the Denver community. She fought alongside of a lot of the greats that we have spoken about as a Black Caucus before. She was one of the founders of Colorado Black Women for Political Action. She fought cancer, multiple rounds of cancer, and unfortunately last night she succumbed to the disease. I always say she was my favorite pain in my boop behind, because she was the one who was always there to tell me what I was doing right, what I was doing wrong, what she was watching, how I was looking, what I was saying. And I honestly, I think, took a bit for granted that she would always be there giving us that advice as one of our most favored and cherished elders. So I know we'll find a way to celebrate her as a Northeast Denver community, as a legislative body. But today I just wanted to ask for your prayers for her transition. She really has impacted every single Northeast Denver seat that's here today, but also just touched so many hearts in our community. And again, we're pretty surprised and shocked by her passing, and we just hold her up and wish her ease on her transition. So thank you, members, for your prayers and for this moment.
Thank you, Representative Herod. Representative Hooten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, the Energy and Environment Committee will not be meeting today. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah, we got her.
The House will stand in a brief recess. House will come back to order. I have a quick announcement. Representative Rich will replace Representative Pico on Finance Committee for today only. Oh, Representative Pico will be replacing Representative Rich on Finance for today only. Sorry about that. That brings us to third reading of bill's final passage. Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over House Bill 1022 until Tuesday, March 1st.
See no objection. House Bill 1022 will be laid over until Tuesday, March 1st. Mr. Shebel, please read the title to House Bill 1024.
House Bill 1024 by Representatives Burton Woog, also Senators Hansen and Kolker, concerning an expansion of the existing sales and use tax exemption for construction and building materials used for the building of public works to require that home rule cities exempt such tax on sales of such materials when used for public school construction and in connection therewith making an appropriation.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1024 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1024 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Neville votes yes. Representative Sandridge, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Sandridge votes yes. Representative Titone, how do you vote? I can come back. Madam Speaker Pro Tem Benavides, how do you vote?
No.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes no. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
No.
Representative D. Valdez votes no. Representative Titone, how do you vote? Can't hear you one more time. We're having audio difficulty. I know. I know how you're going to vote, but we do need audio. I am going.
No.
Oh, I heard it. Representative Titone votes no. Please close the machine. With 49 aye votes, 12 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1024 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1110.
House Bill 1110 by Representatives Basenecker and Bradfield, also Senator Story, concerning the circumstances under which a Board of Education may meet in executive session when selecting a chief executive officer.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1110 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1110 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Neville votes no. Representative Sandridge, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Sandridge votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Titone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Titone votes yes. Please close the machine. With 50 aye votes, 11 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1110 is passed. Co-sponsors. Representative Tone, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1104.
House Bill 1104 by Representative Basenecker, also Senator Priola, concerning public recreational trails and electric transmission corridors of the state and in connection therewith, encouraging transmission providers to enter into written agreement for the construction and maintenance of power line trails and requiring transmission providers to provide informational resources and notify local governments regarding the potential for power line trails when planning for the expansion or construction of transmission corridors.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1104 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1104 on third reading and final passage. Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Catlin.
I don't come down here on thirds unless I told you yesterday I was going to. And I did tell you that yesterday. This is still a problem bill. I think that people are trying to work on it. They're trying to figure it out. But I want you to know that in agriculture and in the rural part of the state, there are some serious concerns. We don't have any of these easements and rights-of-way across farms that are fenced on both sides. Most of the time, we try to farm underneath these power lines. The Iron Man or the poles that we have to deal with, we try to figure a way to get around and underneath them. So to carve a pathway in and say, well, it's going to be also recreational is a problem. To say we will protect your property with fences on both sides, you've now cut us off from the property on the other side of the easement. I know we're talking about giving municipalities the opportunity to do these things and be in on it early on. But private property rights are really important. They may not seem as important to those who would like to use the surface rights, but the man and woman and kids and operations that run these outfits, it's incredibly important. Ag is in a tough spot right now. You know, I really would like you to vote no. There's a lot of reasons I'd give you, but I want to keep this moving forward, so just know that it's something that we need to think about. We as a state need to think about our agricultural communities, our rural communities, and it doesn't all turn on a recreational wheel. Thank you.
Minority Leader McKean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I hope that Representative Catlin's coming down on thirds had the effect that it should, which is to make us think. Loveland, Colorado is part of a four-city utility called Platte River Power Authority, and the power lines on which there's an easement go from Loveland up to Estes Park up Pole Hill Road. Pole Hill Road crosses a lot of private property, and it is also one of the most coveted places in my area to go hunt. And guess where some of those meadows are? They're right down in the clearing where the easement is for the power line. And when you think about what I started thinking about when I was listening to Rep. Catlin, is that this isn't just a rancher out, you know, with a power line crossing their property where you've got folks out there saying hello to their cattle. We're actually talking about the intersection of people's livelihoods, people's recreation, where there is not necessarily always a compatible coexistence in that moment at that time. I think we've probably all been out in places where either we've been the recreator in the midst of folks wearing blaze orange, or we were the folks that wearing blaze orange out in the middle of the recreators. And it's something that we have to consider. And so when we come and we pass laws to say this is the new way it's going to be, and yet they don't take into account all of those things, I think that's an important moment to pause and say maybe this isn't the best way. And so we don't necessarily come down here to convince a bunch of people to change their votes on third reading, But I'm down here to convince you to change your vote on third reading. I'm here to say vote no on this bill. It doesn't mean that the idea dies. What it really truly means is that it gives a second opportunity to really go back and take a look at this and stakehold it maybe and answer some of those questions. So when it comes up here, you don't have to listen to Rep. Catlin or myself or others say, this is a bad idea, we don't think this is the right way to do it. I'd ask you to really seriously consider a no vote on this bill.
Representative Biesenecker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you too, Representative Biesenecker.
I want to thank Minority Leader McKean and also Representative Catlin for the thoughtful remarks. I think it is helpful to clarify in particular Amendment L003, which is adopted in committee, exempts Platte River Power Authority from this bill. So while I appreciate the concern, it is explicitly carved out, as are other municipal utility providers, as are rural electrical authorities as well. We've done extensive stakeholder work to make sure that folks who have concerns in this space, specifically our transmission providers, and also those with an eye to wildlife and habitat, have the protections that they need in order to act responsibly in considering a trail. I want to also mention that the problem is not this bill. The problem that we're hearing about is with the permissive nature of statute that allows these trails to be built in the first place. That is not this bill. You can already build these trails, and there's lots of good reasons to build them, and there's lots of bad reasons why you should not build them. What this bill does is it creates a conversation and an opportunity for community members to weigh in and discuss whether or not a trail makes sense in their community. It might not, and we respect that decision. I also want to mention a few of the other things in regards to private property rights that keep coming up. To be clear, as I've mentioned again, and you'll hear me say probably a few more times, you can already build these trails. That is something that is being done, has been done, and will be done in the future. There is no change to the permissive nature of statute in that regard. This bill, however, if you're concerned about private property rights, if you're concerned about public property rights, if you're concerned about the right of a transmission provider to be obligated to build a trail in that right-of-way, this bill actually gives you the protections that statute does not afford you at present. At present, there is no carve-out for a private property owner. At present, there is no carve-out for a public property owner. At present, there is no carve-out that allows a transmission provider to say no. So if the concern truly is private property rights, this bill affords you protections which statute at present does not allow for. I heard that concern from our stakeholders. I respect that concern from our stakeholders, and we amended the bill in response to language suggested by our stakeholders. That is the amended language you see in the bill at present. Likewise, if wildlife and habitat is a concern for you, and it should be, this bill provides protections that statute at present does not allow for. We adopted an amendment in committee that provides important processes and safeguards to ensure that we protect these very things. We heard our stakeholders clearly, we added an amendment, and these things must be considered before a trail can be built in any right-of-way. There are a lot of places where it is not appropriate because of impacts on habitat and wildlife to build a trail. This sets in place a necessary and mandated consultation which would allow for those comments to come forward. At present, statute affords you no obligation to go through that process. If wildlife and habitat are a concern for you, this bill gives you the language you need in order to have those conversations and to act responsibly in other parts of our state. Lastly, if enforcement and compliance is important to you, and it should be, this bill does not speak to those things. That decision and conversation always has and should live with the jurisdictions that would be impacted by a trail going through their jurisdiction. That is state statute at present. That is state statute after this bill is voted on. There is nothing in this bill that changes that. If there are issues with compliance and enforcement, we still suggest that the best place to solve those things is between the local jurisdiction and the residents who have concerns. We added language in the first draft of the bill that would have outlined a number of things, including enforcement and compliance, that would have been helpful to consider in the building of a trail. Our counties, our cities, our stakeholders from the transmission side all agreed this was not necessary, that they could sort this out on a case-by-case basis, and a one-size-fits-all approach was not appropriate. So I appreciate the comments. I think it's important to clarify both the intent and the scope of the bill, and also the protections the bill will give you that are lacking at present. This bill does not establish a right to create a trail. That can already happen. What it does is creates a logical and I think responsible process around the creation of these trails, informing the conversations between a local jurisdiction, the transmission provider, and the residents who would necessarily have interest in weighing in on those trails. This bill facilitates good policy on sound data, local considerations, and important conversations, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate all of the attempts to do that. I think there's a lot of good intent behind here, but there's a fundamental issue that comes down there, and that is when the easement is granted, that's access for a specific purpose. The owner still owns the land. The owner can still use the land. The easement is for a very limited, very specific purpose. This opens the door for a lot more, and that is the fundamental problem that many of us have with this. And I ask for a no vote. And let's continue the conversation and make sure that it actually works for everybody who owns the property and operates within those constraints.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none. The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1104. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Neville votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Please close the machine. With 37 aye votes, 24 no votes, and 4 excused, House Bill 1104 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Froelich, Madam Speaker Pro Tem, co-sponsor. Representative Tatone, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1017.
House Bill 1017 by Representatives Burton Woog, also Senators Colker and Liston, concerning an expansion of the excise tax exemption for alcohol beverages brought into the state.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1017 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1017 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Neville votes yes. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Please close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 2 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1017 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1039.
House Bill 1039 by Representatives Kippen, Van Winkle, also Senators Bridges and Woodward, concerning simplification of the means by which proof of eligibility for sales and use tax exemption is established.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1039 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the passage of House Bill 1039 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to help. Please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Neville votes yes. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Please close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1039 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1112.
House Bill 1112 by Representative Doherty, also Senator Gonzalez, concerning the notices required pertaining to on-the-job injuries covered by worker compensation insurance.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1112 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1112 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Neville votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Bacon. Please close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 22 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1112 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Lindsay, Representative Froelich, Representative Benavides, co-sponsor. Representative Tatone, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of the House Bill 1135.
House Bill 1135 by Representative Snyder and Van Winkle, also Senator Holbert, concerning permitting the transfer of a marijuana transporter license with a change of ownership.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1135 on third reading, final passage.
The question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1135 on third reading and final passage. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members, please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Neville votes yes. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Please close the machine. With 55 aye votes, 7 no votes, and 3 excused, House Bill 1135 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative A. Valdez, co-sponsor. Representative Tatone, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1070.
House Bill 1070 by Representative McCluskey, also Senator Rankin, concerning early childhood development service districts and in connection therewith, allowing a district to include in its service area less than all the territory of an existing taxing district and to accept gifts, grants, and donations.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1070 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1070 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Neville votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Please close the machine. 44 aye votes, 20 no votes, and 1 excuse. House Bill 1070 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Froelich, Lindsay, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. Mr. Shebel, please read the title of House Bill 1101.
House Bill 1101 by Representatives McLaughlin and Catlin, also Senators Sonnenberg and Zenzinger, concerning the expansion of a program that allows a Public Employees Retirement Association service retiree to work full-time without any reduction in the service retiree's retirement benefits for a rural school district that has a critical shortage of qualified individuals with specific experience, skills, or qualifications that the service retiree has.
Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move House Bill 1101 on third reading, final passage.
Question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1101 on third reading and final passage. See no further discussion. Mr. Shebel, please open the machine and members please proceed to vote. Representative Neville, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Neville votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
No.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes no. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Tatone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Tatone votes yes. Representative Ricks. Representative Ricks. Please close the machine. With 51 aye votes, 13 no votes, and 1 excuse, House Bill 1101 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Representative Lindsay, Representative D. Valdez, Representative Tatone, Representative Froelich, co-sponsor. Please close the machine. That brings us to second reading of bills. Representative Exum. Members, you have heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Exum will take the chair.
The committee will come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there's a request to reading the bill at length. Committee reports are printed in your bill folders. 4 amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads. Bills will be laid over upon the request of the majority leader, and the court rule is relaxed. Mr. Shebo, please read the title to House Bill 221049.
House Bill 1049 by Representatives Bacon and Ricks, also Senator Pedersen, concerning prohibiting a post-secondary institution from making payment of an outstanding balance on a student's account, a condition of issuing the student's documents.
Thank you. Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I move House Bill 1049 and in the amendment L008 to the committee report.
Just move the bill and the education report to the education report.
Okay, I move House Bill 1049 to the Education Committee report.
To the education report. Representative Bacon.
Thank you, members. In the Education Committee, we actually rescoped the original bill and brought a strike below. Originally, House Bill 1049 addressed the, originally, the bill said that no university could withhold transcripts for any reason, for any fees or for tuition. The strike below that we brought to the Education Committee fundamentally changed that and stated universities could withhold transcripts for tuition, room and board, as well as any financial aid reasons. However, they could not withhold those transcripts for 5 particular reasons. And those reasons are if a student needed a job, a transcript for a job, if they needed to transfer to another school, if they need to apply for financial aid, if they needed to pursue opportunities in the military, or if they needed to pursue any other post-secondary opportunities. Also, the strike below created language to say that universities need to come up with a policy in the event they do withhold transcripts. That policy has to be reported to CDHE. They also have to report to CDHE how many students they send to collections and if they're Pell eligible. And finally, it created a provision for students to be able to complain to the student loan ombudsperson in the AG's office so that the AG's office could collect data on how many schools may be refusing transcripts. And the CDHE report and the AG's report both need to be shared out to us in smart hearings. And so that was the main work of the Education Committee. Mr. Chair, we do have some amendments.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, raise your hand.
Move the amendment, please.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Representative Ricks.
and thank you, Mr. Chair. I move amendment L008.
That amendment has been properly moved. Now, this is amendment to the committee report, right?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. That amendment has been properly moved and is now displayed to the amendment. Representative Ricks.
And this amendment is where we're doing the carve-out for foreign students. We also are specifying in what instances a higher ed can withhold transcripts. They cannot, as Representative Bacon said, in the if they're trying to get a job application, if they're going back to school, if they're going to the military, they cannot withhold a transcript from students or charge a higher fee to obtain a transcript or diploma. So,
Thank you. Representative Bacon.
Yes, I just want to add, we spent additional time with the higher ed lobby, and we rescoped the bill. We reordered the bill so that the language is clearer on what it is that cannot be withheld and for what reason. And so if you take a look at Section 2A, it's just written to be a little bit more clearly stated and being more direct in the language. A post-secondary institution may refuse to provide a transcript except for those 5 reasons. Section 3 is also stated more clearly in saying that even if a transcript is withheld, these are the 3 things, ABC, that you cannot do if you withhold a transcript. So for those of you in Education Committee, the order is switched. Section 2 in the original strike below has now been moved down to be able, again, to be clearer on what it is that you can withhold from. And so this is from feedback from higher ed. We will also note that we heard feedback from higher ed to do a carve out for foreign students, as it is more difficult to be able to collect debts from them if they are outside of the country.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Amendment L008 to the Education Report? Yes, Representative Pico.
Hold on. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate the fact that you're trying to clarify this, but you're giving exceptions for basically all the reasons that someone go get a degree in the first place. And I'll take issue with the idea that, you know, if you're going to go apply to the military and you're going to go jump in there and you need a degree, part of that military aspect is you have to be able to show good character. Your security clearance is going to verify that whether or not you have actually paid your debts. These are all reasons the military is going to want to know. And for one thing, to say that you're going to get your degree and you're going to show up there and you're going to qualify for a position without paying your debts for how you got that degree, that's pretty fundamental. And I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Thank you. Representative Bacon. Hold on. I'm going for a reply, and then I'll get you.
Thank you. I do want to reserve perhaps the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the content of the bill. The amendment is not adding those categories. Those categories are already in the underlying bill that we're going to talk about, just for clarity's purpose. And we do have some thoughts on what it is that you shared that perhaps I'd like to be able to share and when we get into broader debate outside of the amendment.
Thank you. Representative Hortorf. You want to speak on the amendment? Okay. All right. Representative Kipp to Amendment L008. Okay. Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L008 to the Education Committee report. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The amendment is adopted.
Okay.
Back to the Education report. Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move L009 to the committee report. And I ask that it be displayed.
Thank you. That is a proper motion, and the amendment is now before us to Amendment L009. Representative Ricks. Representative Bacon.
Thank you. Amendment L009, again, upon further conversation with higher ed, provides clarity in two places. The bulk of the language you see on page 2, they ask that we put into the bill that universities are allowed to create their own verification processes. To say that if someone does need a transcript for those 5 reasons that we outlined, that they can come up with their own policy for that. And so we needed to reword that section about the policy that they need to be able to create to send to CDHE. The rest of the amendment is to reorder the sections of that policy because we added that first paragraph. The last line, line 27, strikes out language that was suggestive on bringing lawsuits against universities. So we took that language out because we want the accountability measure to really go to the student loans ombudsperson in the AG's office and not private rights of action. I urge an aye vote.
Any further discussion on Amendment L009? Yes, Representative Hortorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, as we go through the amendments to this bill, it appears that it really doesn't change in any significant way the original premise of the bill as it reorders things. The only thing that this amendment does is something that everybody wants, that's in post-secondary education. which is control of their administrative functions, and not for state statute to take it away so they can define their own terms. So you've given them a small concession with this amendment, but you still have taken away their rights as a post-secondary institution. And that's what this amendment dances around.
Thank you. Any further discussion on Amendment L009? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of Amendment L09 to the Education Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. Amendment L09 is adopted. Back to the Education Committee report.
No further amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other further discussion on the Education Committee report? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of the Education Committee report to House Bill 1049. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. The Education report is adopted. To the bill. Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is a very important bill for Colorado. The reason why we're very stoked about it is it helps to remove barriers out of the ways of students. We want to encourage students to go back to school, to get jobs, to go to the military, and to be able to further their future. By withholding transcripts, we're putting barriers in the way, in the path of students who are not going to be able to have a great future. During the testimony in committee, we heard from many students who came and poured out their hearts about the stories that and the trauma that they've gone through trying to get transcripts because they may not have money or they may not be able to support themselves. And we don't want to continue to do that process. We're not taking anything away from higher education. We're saying work with the students. We're encouraging them to find ways to ensure that they can get paid. But by withholding transcripts, it's not doing that. It's like, what comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Do I get a job and then pay you, or do I not get a job and I can't pay you? So we're trying to increase opportunity for students. House Bill 1330 last year was a bill that encouraged students to go back to school, to upskill, retool, and to do what they needed to do to take care of their future and their families. So Colorado must be a place for opportunity, for full employment for everyone, and we strongly support this bill and ask for your yes vote.
Representative Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, and thank you to all of those of you paying attention. This bill is really important to our state. There isn't a university across the four corners of our state that doesn't have students who have transcript holds. And so the one thing I can promise you all, because I know we're also invested in this conversation, is that I guarantee you, you might have, or you most likely will have, a constituent who will thank you for this bill. Any of us who have gone to college know the struggle of student debt. Any of us, I think many of us, even when we talk to our colleagues here, have experienced a hold on our transcripts.
Representative Bacon, hold on just a second. Members, it's getting a little loud. Please take your conversation off to the side so we can hear what's going on in the well. Thank you very much. Representative Bacon, please continue.
Thank you. But the truth of the matter is 36 million adults in the U.S. have earned college credits but haven't finished their degree. We know that 55% of jobs that offer a salary of at least $35,000 are filled by workers with a bachelor's or advanced degree. There are 6.6 million people in this country in transcript limbo, which means they've completed some classes, but perhaps couldn't pay fines or fees or some of their tuition. And so their credits are stuck with their institutions, and they can't access them to be able to improve their outcomes. And so what we heard in committee was from people who lived through this. And even as we talk about the military, the truth of the matter is sometimes families have to choose groceries and diapers over paying tuition. But it doesn't mean they lack character. What it does mean, though, is that they cannot move forward to increasing or creating better opportunities for themselves Because even though they may have paid for 3 years of credits, perhaps not paying for a fine would keep them from what it is that they earned. Members, earning a degree is not something you can take back. Your knowledge is not something you can take back. It is not collateral. But at the end of the day, we also know that as this state, we have a commitment to developing our own workforce. We have a commitment to being sure our neighbors can prosper so that they can further invest in our state, whether it's through their income taxes, their sales, or property taxes. And that also means the state cannot become a barrier to achieve those goals. And this is something that we can control to shake free the paradox that is transcript limbo. Now, members, I do also want to address the conversation we heard in committee. There was a report from the Colorado Department of Higher Ed that said we did need to look at data before we make a policy on this. It also said that perhaps we may see a loss of revenue to the higher ed system, and not necessarily the system, but the institutions. But what I do want to say to that is there is evidence from across the country of states that have entered into this practice that counter that narrative. And furthermore, as the sponsor of this bill, who spent months in doing stakeholder work with all of our institutions, the data that we got back on the impact was so varied that it could only be addressed through narrative. That unfortunately, not a single university was actually able to report what their return is for transcript holds. Universities did say that they actually do use debt collection. And 4 out of the 9 universities who reported said, we're unsure what that amount would be. 2 universities didn't respond. So there are things that we do know about this practice. We do know that our neighbors are stuck. We do know that degrees equal opportunity. For the states that have looked at it, in Ohio, for every student that they put through collections, they got maybe 7 cents back on the dollar. And we've seen universities who've even gone so far in Michigan, New York, Washington, and California, that when they offer a little bit of debt erasure, the revenues go up because it brings students back to school. Ladies and gentlemen, higher ed enrollment is flat and on the decline, and people are stuck without upward mobility. This bill addresses that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assistant Minority Leader Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So members, we heard this bill on education, and we had some, pretty good concerns with the policy as introduced, as well as the strike below. And I appreciate the sponsors talking about a report that was offered by Colorado Department of Higher Education. So a couple of the concerns that we flagged and that we discussed in committee had to do with, if we're going to implement this policy, what does that really mean for tuition costs for students that may not find themselves in some of these financially challenged areas? And the anticipation is that certainly tuition costs are going to go up to cover that loss of revenue that would otherwise not necessarily take place if it not for this policy. So the commission report, from Colorado Department of Education, it's available on their website. It is one of their policy briefs. It does say, and I'll read it to you verbatim so that we all know what it says. It says, some states have passed legislation to either prohibit or regulate withholding student transcripts. The effects of these restrictions is not known due to the recent passage of these laws. According to, and there's a report here, I believe it is the ITHAKA, and then capital S plus R. There's a link in this report that you can click on if you find the report. It says the California State University system estimated their loss in the hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, and the University of California system speculated that losses could reach 10 to 12 million per year. That's 10 to 12 million per year. The University of Washington also postulates that losses could total millions of dollars each year out of their total annual revenue of around $4.9 billion. That's with a B, $4.9 billion. It is important for Colorado to consider data-driven solutions before introducing any type of regulation. The report from Colorado Department of Higher Education also offers a spreadsheet that kind of goes through the different universities with the revenue recouped from transcript withholding. So this is what they believe, their estimates based on data that they are able to recoup. So let me read you some of these universities. So Ames Community College, they estimate that they can recoup anywhere or approximately $253,239.56. Colorado Community College System, $4.9 million per fiscal year. That's what they believe they can recoup. If status quo is maintained, if current policy that's in statute right now remains, they estimate they can recoup $4.9 million. Let's go on to Colorado School of Mines. They were actually in committee and they testified. They testified to about $20 million. This report says $19,356,715, and that's just for fiscal year 20. CSU Fort Collins, $55,043,856. That's what they believe they can recoup if this policy is not adopted. Let's look at CSU Global, $3,213,394. If we go on to CSU Pueblo, $241,074. So we do CU, so think of Anschutz, Boulder, Colorado Springs, a total of $157 million per year for the entire system. That's $157 million. That's what they believe they could recoup, if not for this policy that we have before us today. Fort Lewis College, $1,219,630. Let's go to Technical College of the Rockies, $12,480. University of Northern Colorado, $731,787 recouped. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can see, based on the report from Colorado Department of Higher Education, what they believe this policy will do for their ability to recoup revenue. That's revenue for services rendered, and if this policy is adopted, it is highly estimated that tuition costs on students are just going to increase, and Colorado Department of Higher Education said that we should maybe not do anything until we have further information based on policy that's been recently adopted. So Colorado Department of Education is saying it may not be a good idea, and yet here we have this policy before us. And members, I also think it's important to highlight that current statute right now, it allows flexibility for these institutions of higher education to work with students. There is no requirement that they withhold transcripts. There is no requirement that they turn them over to debt collections. There is none of that. In fact, statute actually reads that there is flexibility and that the school can figure this out with the student. So that discretion that the school has, the ability to work with the student to try and navigate what is, no one's arguing, this is a challenging situation financially for students, and how do they navigate that? But there is nothing in statute that prohibits that institute and that student from having a conversation and working together to figure that out on an individual basis. So members, I would firmly ask for a no vote. I think that we risk increasing tuition costs across all of our students at a time when, student debt is already through the roof, and now this policy, in my opinion, would certainly raise tuition costs, and I just don't think that that's appropriate for the state of Colorado, and I certainly don't think it's appropriate for students that are looking to advance their careers and open up job opportunities as they go into their professional careers. So thank you, members.
Thank you. Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, sir.
And members, I won't go over the report from our own Department of Higher Education again, although I do think that there is important information that you all need to pay attention to when doing that. The most important takeaway from that is that there is no conclusive data. At best, there is no conclusive data suggesting that this policy would not have an impact on tuition, that it would not have a negative impact on our institutions of higher learning. Now, you know, I don't want to belabor that point too much, but what I'm saying is if somebody is telling you that based on what other states have done, that there will not be a negative financial impact, that is incorrect because we don't know. Now, the 2 points that I want to underscore as well is, first of all, the very real possibility that this will result in an increased tuition for all other students at institutes of higher learning. Our institutions are not capable of absorbing, in the case of the CU system, a $100 million annual fiscal hit. And one of the main ways they have to recoup that is through increasing their revenue collection through tuition. So it is a very real possibility that if this policy were to pass and those reduced finances do materialize, that every other student in the state will suffer a financial penalty because people are not paying their debts. Another thing that I think was important, we came and heard in committee, brought to us by the community college system, is that this will actually end up probably hurting the students who are supposedly going to be benefited by this. There is a continuum of ways that institutions can recoup these costs. And, you know, the most benign would be to go and ask for the student to pay back and the student pays back. The most extreme is to send them into debt collection. In committee, we confirmed with the institutes of higher learning that came in and testified that there is no communication with a credit rating agency if a student is subject to transcript withholding. That is not the case if they are sent to debt collections. So transcript withholding takes place before there is any communication with an outside debt collection firm. So it will not have a permanent record increase. You know, there won't be a credit reporting agency. It won't be reported to your employer in a direct way. So it is a less adverse route to collect this debt than sending somebody to collections. If we remove this as an option for the institutes of higher learning, it is very likely that they will refer students to debt collection faster because they no longer have this lever to say, hey, if you want us to produce your transcripts, you're going to need to settle up this debt. If they are referred to a credit collection agency, the long-term adverse impacts to these students are going to be far worse because that is going to impact their ability to get housing. It is going to impact their ability to get a job. It is going to potentially result in wage garnishment. All of the negative impacts that are supposedly happening from transcript withholding will be far worse if these students are set to collections, which is very clearly what will happen. So, you know, members, I can see that we're all paying rapt attention here, but I really would just like to underscore that we're very seriously potentially harming not only the students that we're trying to help here, but the institutes of higher learning in our state that is going to result in an adverse, this bill is just going to hurt every single person that is involved in this situation. So, members, I'm having a real hard time, you know, reconciling with the fact that nobody's paying attention. But anyway, you should vote no, and this is a bad bill.
Thank you. Representative Rich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to my colleague from Jefferson County, I was listening as well to what you had to say, and I want to thank you for your remarks, and also to the Assistant Minority Leader for all of that data that he provided. I kind of want to just ask this question. When someone is planning to go to college or in a university, we've talked about improving financial responsibility of that individual. This bill doesn't do anything to teach them financial responsibility. Instead, it sets a precedent that they can go to college, and if they don't pay their bills, they can still get their degree and all is well. And I know you talk about this being an equal opportunity. This is not an equal opportunity bill. everybody else is going to see higher tuition. So this is not equal opportunity by any means. And I urge a no vote on this bill.
Thank you, Representative Rich. Representative Soper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
And it's an honor to serve with you too, sir.
Members, I also rise in opposition to this bill. And as someone who has 4 degrees from institutions of higher education, I can speak firsthand to what's being addressed in this bill, or at least attempted to be addressed in this bill. There's nothing in here that is going to, for example, if you have a student loan, that is not an issue between the institution and the student. That'd be between a third party. What we're talking about here are things like fees or parking tickets. The ability for the university or the college to be able to collect that debt is very important. I thought my colleague from Jefferson County made a very good point when he said that if we remove the ability to withhold transcript and we now are pushing them to debt collection, a debt collection will directly impact the ability for that student to rent a house, to get a job in the future. It will be with them for much longer than just having their transcript held back. The other thing, when talking about transcripts, there's official and unofficial transcripts. I have certainly applied for my fair share of things back when I was a student, and they required typically unofficial transcripts, which were not subject to a hold, which meant that the barrier envisioned in this bill is not reality. You could still be able to use that unofficial transcript when applying for a job, and even when transferring. The other thing that is, is contemplated here are credits. Already, Colorado has a pretty poor system when it comes to being able to transfer credits. I know because I had pursued some credits and wanted to transfer them to Mesa State College at the time. I couldn't transfer a single one of those credits from UNCC, and it definitely drove me nuts because those were credits I had already paid for, but the institution didn't recognize them. And so it wouldn't matter if I had a debt that I owed or not. You still have the inter-college politics of what they will recognize. But the bottom line here is this makes Colorado higher education more unaffordable, more unattainable for the average working person, because colleges and universities will raise their tuition and fees to make up for the lost revenue that this bill is going to create, which means that more people, like everyone sitting here who were hardworking students, who had the odd job, who might have picked sweet corn like I did to pay my way through college, now all of a sudden are going to have to be paying more to be able to earn that college degree. And that the dream of being able to go to college for many is going to become more and more unattainable. We need to be focusing on bills that make Colorado more affordable, not unaffordable. This adds to the current wave of inflation that we have, and I certainly fear the direction that this will take things here in Colorado. But there's also a personal note here as well, which is the element of accountability. When I was in college at Mesa State College, I was chairman of the Parking Appeals Committee. It was my first foray into being a judge. And I can tell you, we heard every excuse you could imagine. Everything from it was a snowy day and I was late for class and I couldn't pay the parking meter. But then they would come before the Parking Appeals Committee and they would say the exact same excuse once again. And instead of paying a $20 fine, then once we added fees to it, it became a $50 fine. And then they would let all of these parking tickets stack up, and by the time of graduation, there were some students that had $300 or $400 worth of parking fines. And if there wasn't a mechanism to be able to hold that transcript, the university would never be able to enforce the parking rules. And it's not just about making revenue for a university or college. There's actually an underlying reason why you have rules. And the reason why you have parking rules at a college and you have to pay the meter is that there's a limited number of parking spaces. I challenge anyone here to go to any college or university in our great state and find one that doesn't have a parking problem. And that's why colleges and universities typically have a pay-for-parking scheme. And so that's the underlying policy. And then to cut off the ability to collect for it means that if I'm a student, now all of a sudden parking is automatically free under this bill. And that you might as well park anywhere, knowing that you don't have to be held accountable for this. So this is actually encouraging criminal-like behavior as well. A disrespect for the laws of our state and a disrespect for the laws that have been enacted, or I should say regulations, at the university. So it goes against accountability, it makes Colorado more unaffordable, and it leads to even worse consequences by moving students from a situation where it'd be transcript withholding to debt collection, which now means that they're going to have a bad credit rating that's going to follow them much longer than if they...
Representative Soper, I wouldn't say this is encouraging criminal behavior. You can use a better word than that. Thank you.
Sure. And, Mr. Chair, I would argue that not paying a parking ticket would be criminal behavior. But we could debate that another day.
Yeah, let's do that another day, not here. Thank
Sounds
you.
good. Yes. So I will take that on, actually. So maybe not criminal behavior, but it's a violation of a civil infraction. And that if that sounds better, that you're still violating laws of our great state, maybe we won't call it criminal, we'll call it a civil infraction. Thank you.
There you go. Much better. Thank you. Representative Baisley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to talk about the criminal behavior associated with this. I'm kidding. It's a joke. No.
I know you are. You're good.
So I have the pleasure of serving on the Education Committee as well, and so was there to hear the bill. And I get the heart of the idea of the bill to help out students that are hurting and in need and so on. However, I also believe that this not only encourages inappropriate behavior in not being disciplined with your finances, but also going forward, if this bill were to pass and get signed into law, then students going into college, into universities would then know in advance that, I can blow off these and that can be my expenses that I can put off for maybe forever. I just think that's a wrong message to be sending to the folks that we're trying to bring up as self-reliant and honest citizens, tax-paying and pulling their weight along with the rest of us. Primarily, this is an impact because anyone who's taken any accounting classes, debits and credits and left and right side of the balance sheet, you know that if you do not pay this one, it's going to have to come out somewhere else. So the universities will be faced with that. The colleges will be faced with that. Are they going to pay their teachers less? That's an option. Are they going to raise tuition on everybody else? That's another option. Will they cut back on services? That is another option. But it has that negative impact that goes everywhere rather than simply expecting the student who received the service to pay for that service as contracted with the university. Two other points. It's one thing for this body to extend a new law that has a requirement like this on public education, but this extends to private education as well. And how wrong is that? That we tell private education that they have to swallow these fees and not be able to leverage the product that the student has purchased. And lastly, it's not like money isn't available for the students to cover their expenses. The need-based funding that we funded out of this body, this legislative body last year, is $181 million. Now, if they are tapping into that largesse, that generosity from the taxpayer, well, let's expect them to at least cover the expenses as they go through their school semester. So, and that number is only going to increase, and it's going to increase a lot more if we start piling on to the citizens the behavior that this bill would encourage. So it is all around not a good idea, and we need to really show our responsibility to the citizens and vote no on this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I have Representative Pico up next, and Representative Kipp and Representative Gray is in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A rise in opposition to this bill is a great idea that you want to help people, but how you get there is important. One of the key things that this bill does is come up with all the reasons that you will not withhold a degree. Well, they're all the reasons you go to school to get a degree for. You go to there for higher education. You go there to get a job. You go there for all of those different reasons. And now you're saying, well, your last semester, you can just skip the payment. And it leaves no other option other than to go to collections. Now, what I'm going to talk about here is essentially repeating what everybody else has kind of said, but I'm going to, one of the tenets of education is repetition. So class is in session. The costs to the university of doing this are going to be spread across everybody else. Those who decide not to pay for whatever reason, whether they can't or everything else, that drives the costs up to the university, and the only recourse the university has essentially is to raise tuition for everybody else, raise the fees to cover what those who don't pay decline to pay for, or to go to collections. It shifts the cost to others, as well as it shifts the cost to the very people that you want to help. It drives those costs up. It results in higher tuition fees. It leaves the university with the only recourse to refer to collections. And that's been already mentioned, but I want to emphasize this. You go to collections, you're going to wreck the credit rating of those who you're trying to help. You talk about one of the things you want to go to the military and take that degree, take that higher transcript. I'll tell you for a fact that the military takes a very dim view of credit ratings wrecked by failure to pay your debts. That will lose your security clearance in a heartbeat. You can kiss that goodbye, and without a security clearance, you can kiss all those jobs that you got the degree for goodbye. You won't get them. The military doesn't want people who don't pay their debts. If you can't pay your debt, why did you incur it in the first place, number one? But if you can't pay your debt, if you're in that situation, go get a loan. Now you take it out of the issue, you pay the university, you're paying that, and you now have that obligation separate, and you can do that. But if you fail to do that, you're giving an incentive for everyone else who comes up, hey, I don't have to pay 3 years of my tuition to get a 4-year degree. You're going to increase the incentive to do that. You're going to drive up the cost for everybody, and you're going to wreck the credit ratings of the very people you want to help. It's a bad bill for a lot of reasons, a good intent, but the wrong way to get there. Class dismissed.
Thank you for that lesson, Representative Pico. Representative Kipp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just really want to thank Representatives Bacon and Ricks for bringing this bill. This is an impactful bill. Withholding transcripts from students who owe their colleges money drives inequitable outcomes, according to U.S. Education Secretary Medel Cardona. More must be done to recover from the damage caused by COVID-19, Cardona was quoted as saying, to emerge from the pandemic even stronger. Institutional leaders must embrace long-term change. This means evaluating long-standing institutional policies that block retention and completion for our most underserved students, such as enrollment and transcripts holds for students with unpaid balances. I have heard from so many students in my district and people who've graduated from Colorado State University, because that's in Fort Collins. People are very concerned about this bill. I was in the Education Committee. We heard heartbreaking, impactful statements from our students. I know that some people are nervous about change. People are always nervous about change. And some of the higher institutions of higher education did come and tell us how they were trying to work with their students to avoid this problem.
Representative Kipp, hold on just a second. Members, please take your conversations off to the side and pay attention to the well. Thank you very much. Representative Kipp, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At any rate, this is an important bill. It needs to get passed. We need to have students who can graduate and get their diplomas so that they can go on to get jobs. I love our higher institutions of higher education in Colorado. They are wonderful. They do good work for our students. And I think there are ways to bring our students to the table to make sure their debts get paid. But if you are racking up student debt as you're going through college and you're just trying to get through, as we know, many of our students are having to access food pantries and other mechanisms just to survive in order to try and get their degrees in order to get ahead. This is an important step to keep people from having stranded debt. We need to pass this bill, and I urge you to support it, and thank you again to the sponsors.
Thank you very much. Representative Gray, you're up, and Representative Hortorf, I see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think that I support the bill, and also think that one of the most counterintuitive ideas in the world is to say if somebody owes money to a higher education institution, the way to get that money is to prevent them from actually getting their degree or diploma so that they can't go get a good paying job, so that they can't actually go get the money to actually pay the obligation. Like, this argument right now that we're having right now is so incredibly impractical, which I'm not, again, I've run bills where we've had that same, but the impracticality of saying, let's deny somebody their college diploma or their transcript, the thing that's going to get them a good job, let's deny it to them until they pay the money, even though that's how they're going to get the money, is so profoundly illogical that, like, I don't normally come down on second reading, but like, it is so profoundly illogical that I have a hard time not saying it out loud. To say that what we're going to do is, until you get the money, we're going to take away the thing that you need to get the job to make the money. Doesn't make any sense in the world to me. There are remedies. You know, there are ways you can go and get the money. You're going to want to do it because you're going to want to buy a car. You're going to want to buy a house. You're going to have to raise your kids. But, like, these are the folks who've actually succeeded. They've gotten a diploma. They have a transcript that exists there. And the idea is, you don't get to use those tools that you had. You don't get to use those tools that you earned to earn money until you pay the money. Is so incredibly contradictory. Like, it actually caused me to come down on second reading, which I haven't done in a long time. But, like, the idea to say, like, until you pay the money, we're going to withhold the tools from you that you just went out and got and worked hard for to be able to earn more money, makes no sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have got to respond to that one. Okay. You want to have the tools, but you don't want to pay for the tools. So let's go down there. You've got to fix a fence. You're going to go down to a hardware store. You're just going to shoplift the tools that you need. Well, I'll pay you later. That's called a loan. If you can't pay the fees You can't pay what you owe, then go get a loan, pay it, earn the money, and pay back the loan. What you're doing here is you're giving an incentive for people to walk out on what they owe. That is the most illogical thing. The idea that you're not going to pay for what you contracted for, you're removing anything except the only option left is collections. That's going to hurt the people far more than what this is. This is a bad bill. It's the most illogical argument was just put on there. Put this into the context. If you need the tools to do a job, you got to pay for the tools, whatever that job is. And these are tools that you need to pay for. If you can't pay for them, borrow the money again, pay for it, but take the load off of the universities, take it out of collections, pay your debts, pay what you owe, you get what you paid for. Again, if you don't do that, if you run this bill as it is right now, you're giving an incentive for people to just walk out the door and not pay. This is a bad bill. Vote no. Class dismissed.
Thank you, Representative Hotorf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, bill sponsors, for the emotional plea that is embodied in this House bill. I will tell you that emotionally driven legislation is dangerous. It's dangerous to the state. It's dangerous to the country. And I'm a proponent of data-driven legislation. I think the claim in the Education Committee was made that data-driven statistics are lacking with respect to the impact on this type of legislation, and perhaps we need more time. I watched the amendments come forth to try to appease the antagonists that were in committee that were saying this is not the right solution set. And I think the amendments took a small step in the direction that the antagonists of this legislation were concerned about. But I don't believe that the amendments went far enough. Now, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to talk about the problem. Uh-oh, signals say maybe not.
You can be kind.
I will be very kind. I will be very kind and respectful to my colleagues and everyone in this chamber.
Appreciate it.
Everybody knows that the cost of higher education is incredibly high. It is probably too high for the value that our youth are getting. Should I smile for you? I'll wait and smile. Okay, I just want to smile. I have a problem with, maybe I have a photographic phobia, I'm not sure. But it definitely distracts my train of thought, which it takes all my energy to keep focused. So I will tell you that as we pour more money into higher education from outside sources, and everybody knows in America there are an enormous amount of ways to get higher education paid for. We have Pell Grants. We have state grants. We have student loans. We have scholarships within institutions of higher learning. There are so many opportunities. We even have the military. Many of us in this room, or some of us rather in this room, have taken that opportunity and served our country to pay for that education that the military allowed us to have. And that was a privilege. Higher education is not a right. It's a privilege. But those inflationary forces are not going away. In fact, they only get increased as we pour more money into higher education from outside sources. And those institutions of higher learning say they need more money to operate. Let us understand that lesson or this problem is not going to get resolved. Everybody wants more money. Everybody thinks they need more money. But in many cases, that claim is untrue. So I speak to the real problem, that those credit hours in those institutions cost too much. And then we have this conundrum, that as students navigate the higher educational institutions that they participate in, they find that they cannot keep up with the cost of learning. But here's the real problem. They sat in the classes. They received the benefit of that institution's educational training and what that educational institution offered. And ladies and gentlemen, they have an obligation to pay for services rendered. I think that was made very clear by our assistant minority leader. And this goes back to responsibility. Personal responsibility. In every economic condition, in every socioeconomic demographic, in every ethnicity, every origin, and every other thing you can think of to put on that list of things that you can think of, I will tell you that we have to go back to personal responsibility. That is a problem. With this type of legislation, we diverge from that and say, well, we know you went to college. We know you sat in the classes. We know that we're having a problem paying for those classes, but now you're going to get all this documentation and you're going to get to defer that personal responsibility and that financial obligation because the state is going to allow you to do that. The state, legislation embodied in Colorado Revised Statute that is the state and the state's Department of Higher Education. Now, I understand that the Colorado Department of Higher Education has concerns with this, have even made requests to slow this down, have made requests to have more data-driven consideration, which I understand has not been received and has not allowed for more time for this legislation to be analyzed. We are going to charge forward. Emotionally, perhaps, driving forward, trying to save those people that are caught in this conundrum. But do you really save them? And do you really save Colorado? Now, this bill really hurts our institutions of higher learning. As they've rendered services and have asked for compensation, which was not a secret, there was full disclosure. There was full disclosure every semester. There was full disclosure every year. And me being a person who pursued higher education at many levels was well aware of the cost of my education and had to accept those burdens and figure out a way to pay for those credit hours. Truly, the institutions that have to bear the burden of the folks that do not pay for services rendered and do not pay in a timely manner. Do not pay upon graduation and say, I can't pay. I'm sorry, I can't pay. Don't have the money. Then the school does have a tool. They say, well, we gave you a service, and if you can't pay, we'll hold your transcripts or your diploma until you pay. But now, with this legislation, we're taking that tool away. Now, the universities have cried out and said, this isn't going to be good. This isn't going to be good for us. CSU, I'm sure, has told their representative how bad this will be. And other people before me today in this podium have made the claim that there are significant costs to this. There are significant costs to not making people pay for what they have received. So how does this get reconciled? Well, I will tell you, it's no secret. The bursar's office, the comptroller's office, the financial office is going to have to run the numbers. They're going to have to figure out, well, how do we cover this delta on the ledger? I wouldn't call it on the balance sheet. I took a few classes in economics. I would call it the ledger. Credit side and debit side. You've got to pay those professors to sit in those classrooms. You have to pay the utility bill that's going to go up, by the way, based on some things that are going on. You've got to keep the lights on. You've got to keep the plumbing working. You have to pay for the administration. And oh, by the way, you have to pay that very high salary to the chancellor or the president and other administrative staff that also say, well, my cost of living is going up, so I demand more money. You see, the conundrum just is further exacerbated. It doesn't go away. But ladies and gentlemen in this chamber, let's be clear and make no bones about it. Those universities are going to cover their costs. And if you think future students aren't going to have higher tuition rates, well, let me tell you, most assuredly they will. And this type of legislation is going to lead to that. Future students will pay more. I think that was a call from leadership. I'll ignore it. Your Colorado parents will have to underwrite a greater financial burden for your children's higher education. So this type of legislation is going to give Colorado that gift. Now, I will tell you, there are people like me who are trying to fight for Colorado and try to keep Colorado affordable. Try to suppress the inflationary forces that are brought upon Coloradoans by people in this building that are overlooking, in many instances, the inflationary forces that are caused by legislation that has these effects. I will tell you, I'm sure Colorado is listening, because higher education is going to cost more money as these institutions of higher learning cover these costs. And these numbers aren't small across this state. Parents are going to have to underwrite these costs. They're going to have to co-sign on those student loans. They're going to have to pay more and supplement more for their kiddos to support their living. Now, I heard a comment earlier, well, you know, when you're in college, you just don't have any money. Well, guess what? We've all been to college. You don't have any money. You live off of tuna and crackers. Unless mommy and daddy gave you the credit card to go to college, you lived off of ramen. You figured out, how am I going to pay for the gas to commute to college? And where's the cheapest place to eat in town so I can get that cheeseburger or 79-cent taco on Taco Tuesdays? That's college life. You scrimp. You work through it. You have to struggle. And then you get your degree. And then hopefully you get the job. Now, the amendment that was presented earlier was everything about what you do after your post-secondary education. But I believe the amendment said, well, if all these conditions are met, you still have to, even if the student hasn't paid their debts, you still have to offer the transcript or the diploma. I find that ironical. And I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it goes back to the cost of living. Do you want to continue, for my colleagues over here on this side of the aisle, do you want to continue to make it more expensive to live in Colorado incrementally? Because that's what this will do for people wanting to go to college. Now, you might not agree with me, but I will tell you, this is what's going to happen. And people will continue to say, it's okay to go into the store and get what I want, and I can leave without having to pay for it. And the state will come and make it okay.
Representative 412, let's stay to the bill, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your leadership. I might have gotten a little off track, and for that I apologize. But I will tell you, there are people in this chamber, there are people in this building that don't want to see more inflationary forces for anything, especially for higher education. And Coloradoans are going to demand that it stops. Coloradoans that I represent in eastern Colorado. Now, where I grew up, personal responsibility was sacrosanct. It was ingrained in the, you will carry your own pail of water, you will carry your own sack of feed, and you will feed your cattle and horses. And if you don't do that, you won't eat. So figure out a way to get it done, because your responsibilities come first, at your own sacrifice. I will tell you, with this bill, that particular notion seems to go out the window. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your time and attention, and I really appreciate the folks that have listened to my commentary.
Thank you. Representative Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, Representative.
I want to come up and address one of my colleagues' comments about withholding the diploma and they couldn't get a job, and they get the diploma, they can go out and get a job. I got news for you, because he mentioned buying a car and a house. If you don't pay for that car, they come repossess it. If you don't pay for that house, they foreclose on it. So we need to pay our bills. I want to comment about the bill itself. The amendments, I looked at the amendments. I think they really don't address the unfairness of this bill. I also think that this bill will increase the cost of college education for those students who are paying their bills. I was one of those students. I struggled to pay my tuition bills. And I think it creates a real potential of making college education inaccessible for Colorado families that are living on the margins. I was one of those Colorado families when I went to college. And any increased cost to higher education could make the difference between attending or not attending. So I'm very concerned about this bill. I think it's driving up costs to those who are paying the bills. So I am in opposition, with all due respect, in opposition to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's an honor to serve with you.
Honor to serve with you, Representative.
So I have read through this bill a few times, and it was in front of our committee. Let's talk about some personal responsibility. You should probably read the bill before you start talking about it. One of the amendments that they put on there specifically was to say schools need to tell students every semester what their bill is. Not that they have to pay it, but here's how to pay it, here's where to pay it, here's how to do things, which gives students that personal responsibility of paying that bill. A lot of you, and if you're in my age group, you know that college used to be a heck of a lot cheaper. And it's so expensive now. It's really, really difficult to work full-time so you can pay your tuition, get through everything, and also have money at the end. And all these students want is to say, I've done the work. Sometimes it's 5 years worth of work. I've done it. I have a little bit of money left to pay, but I don't have a good job to pay for this. There is nowhere in this bill, if you read it, that says that they're free to go without ever paying their tuition. Nothing like that. In fact, it addresses to say, you have to pay your tuition, and here's where you go with it. And here's how to pay your tuition. Nobody is getting a free ride here, but they do have the opportunity to get a good paying job to actually pay that tuition. And they've been warned all the way through college about how much they owe. I say let's give these kids a chance to get that education and contribute to the economy and pay their bills, buy that car eventually. And yes, they'll have to pay for the car too. Nobody's saying they don't. But it's pretty important that we help our students. The last two things I want to say is I would really like to see the data you've come up with about how this is going to raise tuition. And I'd also like you, the next time a vote comes up to pay more for higher education, you actually vote yes on that bill, because it's pretty expensive and they're running on a shoestring right now. And so I would like you all to support higher education. If you have come up here today to say students need to pay their debt, we need to pay our debt to higher education. So let's try for that one too. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Van Deber. And I see you, Representative Pico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to point out what I just heard, and I just wrote it down as I heard it. What I heard was that every semester a university has an obligation to share with a student how to pay the bill. And that was prefaced with the words, not that they have to. Not that they have to. We just have to show them where they can do that. That's a deep concern. And so whether or not the context is accurate, the actual verbatim wording that I just heard was, we'll show you how or where, but not that you have to actually do it. And so that presents us with a conversation about the realities of what happens if a policy like this is enacted. Who does this really affect? The student. So if policy like this is enacted, students who formerly could work with the university to pay off their debt are now pushed into collections by the university. And the essential detail that we want to note right then and there is that university no longer has the authority to work with the student on setting up a payment plan at that point. They're out. And it's over. So what does that mean for the next step of this process? It means inevitably that that student will not repay the money that they borrowed, which has already been noted, that college will then incur that cost. And other students, and it's not just that college, because I can guarantee you, with all due respect to the higher educational system, they will not cut their funding. It will be passed on to the most vulnerable students who would need a college education in the first place that we are talking about today that want to go advance their life. It will be passed on to the individuals we are working to protect. This bill creates a lot more problems than it actually solves. And it hurts the very same students the bill's proponents say they would like to help. Regardless of the amendments offered, there's not a substantial change enough there to ensure that the problems we are pointing out are duly solved. Currently, colleges and universities work with students having difficulty paying those bills. And right now, it needs to be stated over and over again, universities already have help in place to make sure there are exceptions, that students are aware of the policy, that they know they owe a debt, and that there are ways to receive transcripts and or the notification they will be getting a diploma whether or not they pay that bill, so that they can go get that job, they can move their life forward, they can continue to succeed. So the misnomer that they are stopped in their tracks right there and everything is done is not accurate. Universities want to make sure those students can pay and that that student has a transcript or a diploma. It's in their best interest to do so. This bill removes the flexibility for that college and that student to work together to make the student's first stop out of college the debt collector. I am not in support of this bill, so please vote no on HB 22-1049.
Thank you, Representative Pico. This is your third time, and you have 2 minutes, 30 seconds left. Just kidding. Just kidding. Go ahead.
How much is my fines up to? $50. I'm shooting for 100. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to respond to something I heard a few minutes ago when it was said that talking about personal responsibility, those of us object to the bill ought to read it. I can't think of anything more insulting in this debate than to suggest that every one of us who've walked up here with detailed issues hadn't read the bill. Now, come on. If that's the level of discourse that you want this to descend to, you'll regret going there.
Representative
Mr.
Pico,
Chair, I would
let's not
ask that you enforce
impugn
the
our
rules
motives
that
of
you
our,
have.
of our colleagues. Thank you. Representative Bacon, thank you.
Ask that we. Yeah.
Yes.
Is it a long?
Hold on. Representative Bacon, would you like to
Let him go first.
let him go before you
Yeah.
conclude? Thank you. Representative Votor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your courtesy. Thank you, bill sponsors, for your patience. Having served in the military for many years, there's something really important here that was brought up by my colleague who served in the Navy as a lieutenant commander, which I greatly respect. Commander Pico, during his Navy service. My apologies, sir. One of the things in the military that is really an issue for military service to obtain your security clearance is your financial standing. Most military members, either enlisted, warrant, or officer, have to obtain a secret clearance to do their military occupational specialties because of the technical nature of military service and the equipment that those service members are required to operate during their time of service. Now, for those of us that have sat in many OPSEC, SAIDA classes, operational security and subversion against the United States Army in my case, know that financial improprieties, financial issues, debts, and other complicated fiscal or financial matters significantly impact an individual's ability to serve in the military and obtain that clearance. And if they can't obtain that clearance, they find themselves in subordinate roles, and they are not allowed to serve at either the secret level or the top secret level. Now, what really is an issue with regard to that is debt and debt service through college needs to be cleared up. During college, or as soon as, or nearly as quickly as you can, take care of that debt with the university. Now, there are many ways. In fact, there are private companies, there are subsidized student loan companies, there are even government programs. Even in the military, they have programs that will take that debt, that college debt, and either finance it and transfer the debt out of the university, or will eliminate that debt through compensation programs. So the issue of debt is very important that it gets cleared up and transferred to a long-term debt service vehicle, which, oh, by the way, we already have in this country. Now, this particular bill overlooks all of that. It demands that these universities release these documents sooner than later. And there are some amendments that have maybe made this bad bill maybe a little more tolerable or a little bit better. But I will tell you that the issue of debt and debt service and responsible debt management for these college students needs to be addressed right up front in a manner that services the debt through the many financial vehicles that are out there. And it is not fair to a college or university to say the one thing that they have the one thing that they have is a transcript or a diploma. That's the one thing they offer at the end of that period, that piece of paper. It is truly unfair to say, well, you have to give it up. They did the work. Give it up irregardless of, or with few exceptions on this indebtedness. And maybe the indebtedness isn't resolved at the time of graduation or the time that that college or university has to give up that documentation. It's deferred or it's passed on, and not necessarily a good way. So I heard the comments of the previous colleague of mine, and I really believe that this bill doesn't solve the problem. This bill attempts to solve a problem, but it won't solve the problem. It'll only make the problem more complicated. I think this bill needs more work. I think it needs more stakeholder work. And I will be voting no on this bill for those reasons.
Thank you. Representative Bacon.
Members, as we close, I just want to first kind of wrap up some of the conversations that we've heard and also talk to each other as we debate bills like this. Representative Ricks and I spent 4 months talking to every institution in this state. We have coalitions of hundreds of students who've given us their experiences. When we bring bills, we do bring emotion to the bill, but honestly, between the two of us, we know we also have to bring every statistic and every report, because when we talk about our stakeholders, we may be relegated to just talking from emotion, even though that's what all of us do when we come up to the mic. As we talk about urban-rural divide, as we talk about divides, perhaps of our party, the one thing that we know is true is that we are all invested in the thrival of the state of Colorado. And so as we bring bills, that is always on the forefront of our minds. I would also say this impacts, again, people from across our state. We heard from people who are going to school in Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast Colorado, who are paying as they go, but one thing happened to their truck, and they had to put everything aside to fix that transmission, and they couldn't pay tuition. We heard from young families who are Pell eligible, who just lived through the most devastating pandemic we've seen in recent times, who had to pay medical bills and couldn't pay tuition. We've heard from students who lost jobs during the pandemic and they could not pay their tuition. So members, I just want us to be conscious of how we talk about our neighbors when it comes to responsibility. And I'd like us to be conscious in how we talk about our neighbors as they pursue opportunities that are important to them, their families, and their communities. People who want to go back to school are not trying to cheat systems. People who can't pay for school may also just have had to deal with life. And to associate this bill with a lack of character is something we need to be very mindful of as we do business for our neighbors across this state. It is certainly not something on my mind, and I know most assuredly it's not that of yours. At the end of the day, we have looked at the facts in the statistics. I've heard quotes about how the community college system would be impacted, and quite frankly, across 3 memos, there is not a consistent answer on the impact. On a memo from CDHE to the fiscal analyst, the impact to the community college system is listed as NFI, which means no fiscal impact. What we do know is that there are thousands of people stuck in this in-between space. We do know that there is a struggle to get back to school. The very report that CDHE cited says, and it was a national report, looked into this issue because, again, 6.6 million people in this country face this. And if we're going to talk about character associated with paying debts, then we need to be careful of how we talk about anyone in this country with a credit score of 600 and below. And I know that's not what we're trying to do here. But the truth of the matter is you need to earn more to be able to get yourself whole. That is a truth in this country. And so the organization that did this national study said, re-enrolling students with outstanding debt is a way for institutions to recuperate some of the revenue lost on these students. All higher education institutions invest some sunk costs into serving students, regardless of whether or not they finish the term. And bringing back students is a way to improve returns to these costs. Institutions can improve revenue streams by forgiving small amounts of debt and re-enrolling students with past due balances. This is a favorable alternative to costly debt collection practices, which are often as effective as they could be. Forgiving or settling small amounts of debt owed by students who wish to re-enroll is one way for institutions to receive some compensation because they are bringing students in a declining enrollment environment back to school. Finally, for the economic implications, on behalf of myself as a representative who cares about this state and what we are able to provide each other, allowing students with stranded credits to return and complete their post-secondary degrees would boost attainment and directly benefit local economies. A post-secondary credential can increase lifetime earnings by up to $600,000 with especially strong effects for low-income students. The same CDHE report said the students that are most likely impacted are Pell eligible. And it is inequitable because unlike more of their affluent students, they can't pay the debt back. So they are stuck. The increase in income for these students yields higher state and federal tax revenue while also providing the necessary human capital for businesses to grow. Members, if we are saying we have a workforce problem, if we are saying we have challenges with receiving revenues, if we are saying we care that we can grow our own members and our own residents into thriving community members, then we cannot get in the way of actually keeping that from happening. We cannot get in the way of that happening. And of this paradox, the thing we can control and the thing we do know is we can talk about transcripts. And for the 6 states that have done this, including Washington cited, 5 out of their 6 universities said we will no longer withhold transcripts, and not a single one of their community colleges will do it either. That's what they found. They use other tools because there are other tools. And so, members, I urge a vote on a yes on this bill, but also I urge a keen understanding and compassion for our neighbors as we talk about what it is that they seek to support themselves and their communities and their families.
Representative Ricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, as we wrap this up, to refer to our students as criminals because they can't pay their bills, it's just wrong. When you go to college, you're looking to further and improve yourself and improve your life. And we all know that people run into hard times. If they can't get a job, they cannot pay the bill. We've heard a lot about collection agencies and people go into collections. Well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. If you don't have the money to pay your bills, how are you going to pay it? You're going to go to collections anyway. People can fix their credit if they do have a viable job, and then they're able to, pay down debt. They can make arrangements with collection agencies and creditors. So we must not stand in the way of our students being gainfully employed, being able to go to the military, being able to go back to school to improve themselves. We know that higher education is short as far as funding. We need to put more into higher education. But this bill does not solve that issue, and that's not what we're attempting to solve. We are not taking away anything from higher education as far as what measures they can take to work with students and to ensure that they get their monies from these students. They owe the debt, and we're not saying debt forgiveness at all. We're saying give them opportunity, and that's what we're attempting to do. So we ask for your yes vote today, and thank you so much for caring for Colorado students.
Thank you. Representative Van Beber.
As we make our best attempt to talk about respect and collegiality across the aisle, may I remind us all that the last thing I would like to hear as I'm seated in this chamber is that I need to be told that I need to find more compassion. I would like to state very clearly here today that when we go back and forth and have very thoughtful discussions, and you bring bills with an intent to do good work, what we do not need to be reminded of each other is that we might lack compassion in how we respond to the issue. There is a lesson in this today that as we make good decisions and we attempt to have thoughtful dialogue, instructing us from this podium to those seats about whether or not we lack the ability to understand the road that people are traveling down or the shoes that they have walked in is something we should not be doing. There is an assumption there that should not be made. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1049? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of House Bill 1049. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. House Bill 1049 is passed. Yes, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I move that we rise and report.
Seeing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
House will come to order. Mr. Sheeb will please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole begs leave to report it has under consideration the following attached bills, being the second reading thereof, and making the following recommendations thereon. House Bill 1049 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered engrossed and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage.
Representative Exum. Members, you have heard the motion. There are no amendments at the desk. The question before us is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Sheeb will please open the machine, and members, please proceed to vote. For those participating online, Representative Nebel, how do you vote?
No.
Representative Nebel votes no. Madam Speaker Pro Tem, how do you vote?
Yes.
Madam Speaker Pro Tem votes yes. Representative Froelich, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Froelich votes yes. Representative Lindsay, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Lindsay votes yes. Representative Ortiz, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Ortiz votes yes. Representative A. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative A. Valdez votes yes. Representative D. Valdez, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative D. Valdez votes yes. Representative Titone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Representative Titone votes yes. Please close the machine. I think remembering the order of the people on the wall and how they vote is going to help my Wordle game in the morning. With 41 aye votes, 23 no votes, and 1 excuse, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. I believe that just brings us to announcements and introductions. Right? Announcements and introductions. I was about to close it. Representative Michelson Janay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was given permission by the Majority Leader to be absent March 3rd.
So approved. See no further announcements and introductions. Majority Leader Eskar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the balance of the calendar be laid over until Friday, February 25th.
Oh, I didn't see no objection. The balance of the calendar will be laid over until Friday, February 25th.
Have an announcement?
Representative Van Bever. That's fine. Yeah, it's still open. Go ahead.
What's going on?
That's totally fine.
Children's Caucus?
That's great. That's great. Go ahead. Representative Van Bever.
Okay. What day is it? Today is Thursday. The Colorado Children's Caucus will have its second session Thursday, February 24th from 12:15 to 1:15 p.m. The session will be held virtually via Zoom, and a link for this session can be found in your email inboxes. This session will include mental health practitioners, a representative from the Colorado Office of Behavioral Health, A high school senior who has founded a teen-run mental health nonprofit organization.
Representative Duran.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These experts will discuss the current youth mental health crisis, innovative practices, and implementation of iMatter, which was established by legislative action last year. We hope you will join us. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no further announcements or reductions, Majority Leader Escar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.